We're alone once again, so let's find that boring or not so boring topic to talk about. But before that, let's cue the music. Hello everybody, my name is Bigpod and well, I'm alone, as you can probably see. So this episode is gonna be boring, so let's talk about something interesting. Or not so interesting, depending on your interests. So first let's figure out what we're gonna talk about. I was thinking let's talk about Artemis. What is Artemis? Not the goddess, I mean the mission set for a NASA returning to moon. Specifically, we're going to talk about the recently concluded Artemis 2 mission. So, I'm going to read a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to read a lot about it from the internet. So, and I'm going to just be talking about it, going into my opinions. So, let's begin, shall we? If you find this episode boring, I wouldn't blame you. But if you want Josh to be here every time, patreon.com/notaxallowed and get it. Get there and get the number up. So let's begin, shall we? Okay, so first of all, for those who do not know, Artemis is essentially a program to return NASA astronauts back to the moon. Ever since Apollo 17 in 1972, when it was the last flight to the moon, the last Apollo flight to the moon specifically, because Apollo then flew afterwards as a part of Skylab, as a part of, I believe, Apollo Soyuz. Sorry, I'm doing this last minute, so I'm a bit, shall we say, unslept. But yeah, so as I said, it was first program to return to the moon. It was supposed to be preceded by a couple of other programs, but they never actually got off the ground. So, but they managed to get this one off the ground, which is good. And it is all about the everything around the SLS rocket, or as it was previously known as SLS. No, seriously, this rocket is basically preceded by the Constellation program, where it was essentially Ares 5. There isn't much difference between it and Ares 5, as far as I know. Maybe some, but not much. Let's see. Yeah, basically it's Ares 5. I don't know whether they had to rename it, but yeah. And, well, it is on Orion's spacecraft, the Orion capsule, and they're supposed to land with a human landing system, which are made by commercial partners like SpaceX, Blue Moon, and so on. So, but beyond that, we also have to talk about other members. It's not just NASA. It is a program by basically half of the Western world, from what I understand. So this is through something called Artemis Accords, which has been signed by 61 countries apparently up until this point, include all across Europe, Asia, South America, of course, North America, Africa, in Oceania. So not to go into the long list of them, but apparently my country, Slovenia, is on the list, which is really nice to see. Although I don't know what we will contribute, but let's just say happy for it to be there. Even if moral support is all we can give. Me making fun of my own country. Who doesn't like that? But yeah, like, there's probably knowledge that can be shared, because well, were apparently good in sciences, apparently. But yeah, so Artemis is currently built out of 5 missions. Artemis 1, which was done in November 2022, was uncrewed test flight of SLS Orion and ESM, proudly the European service module. Yes, so when you have the rocket, a huge part of the rocket is just to get you out of the atmosphere, so that first 100 kilometers or so. And at that point, about 3/4 of the rocket falls back to the ground. So you're left with this bit if the rocket is this big. Then, well, like I said, 3/4 because I'm showing for camera viewers. At which point you give the push to the moon, and you put the biggest part of that quarter that is left, you throw it away because you don't need to carry that weight, and all you have is the actual capsule. Think about if you watch SpaceX, how the capsule looks, or better yet, if you ever seen any footage of Apollo, how that capsule look, because Orion really looks a lot like Apollo capsule, and the Apollo capsule, when it was flying to the moon and right before landing, had this long part that was what is known as service module, basically where they had all the consumables like oxygen, electricity, solar panels. They didn't use solar panels on the Apollo. They used fuel cells, but today we have all the solar panels, which yeah depends on what you use. And the amazing part is, like, how big that part was, and that's the part that was actually like where the explosion of the Apollo 13 was based, the service module, if I remember correctly. So this time around, service module is a lot smaller, but it was made by Europeans. Yay! Specifically, I believe by let me see. Yes, Air, Airbus. So Orion is made by Lockheed Martin and the European Service Module. How beautiful that sounds! European Service Module was built by Airbus. So ESM, European Service Module, is how beautiful it is. Really is to say ESM, European Service Module. And yeah, Airbus. Airbus is a well-known European plane and space company. Apparently, I didn't know they were that much in space, but it makes sense since they do make satellites. As far as I know, yeah, they're in aerospace, which probably means they do things like satellites and stuff. So, yeah, the goal of Artemis is to make sustainable crude, not crude, but with people, with crew, lunar exploration, which makes sense. As I said, it is 5 missions. First one is Artemis 1, the uh, uncrewed flight, basically, to see if everything works actually, and it successfully splashed down in Pacific Ocean, but there were some problems with the heat shield. Now, so when the rocket or the capsule flies back into our atmosphere, the drag and the forces of our atmosphere and the fact that we have an atmosphere acts kind of like essentially solid. Kind of like, if you fall from great high or great speed onto water, you're gonna feel like it's solid. That's how at that point with that speed, air feels, and this creates a lot of drag and a lot of heat. And to mitigate that heat, they put the belly or the lower part right into the path it falls into, and he didn't get absorbed and flaked off by the heat shield, in this case, of course. So there were some problems and greater than expected erosion found that happened during their entry. But they proceeded, and after 4 years, which, sorry, but that's long, they started with the first crewed test flight of SLS and Orion, the Artemis 2. This is the one that just concluded. The four crew members performed extensive testing of the spacecraft and of like systems and all that while still in high Earth orbit, so not even going on the path to the moon. So they uh did some like how well it handles, how well it like how well you can target specifically getting close to the actual like what would be a docking module if you were having another spacecraft like Blue Moon or SpaceX HLS Starship. Well, so this mission is broadly comparable to Apollo 7, Apollo 8, but unlike those, Apollo Artemis never orbited the moon and flew just a flyby. So after they did those tests in high lunar orbit, they pointed the engines towards moon or in the right trajectory and engaged those engines, and they got to the moon. Then they went behind the moon and back towards the Earth, where they splashed down 9 days later. So in next year we should see Artemis 3 according to the schedule, which is second crewed Artemis mission. It will launch to launch again aboard SLS with Orion and conduct a rendezvous testing and docking testing in Earth orbit with one or both of the commercially developed launch landers. So that would be Starship HLS or and uh, Blue Origin's Blue Moon, as well as they would like to test the new extravehicular mobility units, so essentially spacesuits, that are made by the company Axiom Space. This is broadly comparable to Apollo 9, and in early 2028, we're gonna see the first lunar landing since Apollo 17, with late 2028 as second lunar landing, and that's when the moon base is supposed to be built. So now let's take our focus to the Artemis 2 mission, the one that just concluded. So mission was planned for a while. This is so-called exploration mission 2. Well, yeah, it was using, as I said, Orion, carrying four crew members: Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch. I believe it's Christina Koch. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. I might be wrong. Could be Cook. Koch. I could be wrong. And Jeremy Hansen. So Reed Wiseman served as a commander of the mission, and Victor Glover was the pilot, while the rest were mission specialists. It is important to note that both Christina and Victor made some sort of a record. These were the first people that flew towards the moon, around the moon, that were either, in Victor's case, a person of color, and in Christina's case, woman. Mission quite evolved since its first inception. There was supposed to be uh, asteroid in lunar orbit and some other interesting things. So, but then the asteroid redirect mission was cancelled. So the free return trajectory was set. Okay, so before we continue, I forgot to tell you that the Orion, the CM003 Orion was called Integrity. I'm not sure why, but it's actually a really nice name. Today's names of rockets are really interesting. Like I really like the name Integrity. So, and after the time, there was actually a lot of things that happened. Like there was a lunar gateway space station that was supposed to happen, which got cancelled a couple of months ago. So that never happened. So now it was just a free return trajectory with no other real tasks beyond checking out the systems, which, let's be clear, is, in my opinion, enough. Well, so the hardware was developed and built in the Michoud assembly facility in New Orleans, Louisiana, and was supposed to be uh, expected to be delivered to Kennedy Space Center in March 2023. No, correction, that's summer. But by the May, the timeline slipped quite significantly. The four RS-25 engines, which I believe all four of them flew on a space shuttle, or at least two of them flew on a space shuttle, I believe, were installed on core stage by September 2023, after which a leak was discovered in oxygen valve hydraulics. So one of the engines was replaced. Crew was announced mid 2023, and since then they prepared to fly this mission. They originally was targeted for autumn 2024. No, again, I'm gonna correct myself. The stacking was supposed to begin in 2024. So SLS is made out of core stages, the big part, the big, the big tank where most of hydrogen and oxygen is located for the getting out of the atmosphere, together with two two solid rocket boosters. Essentially, they're actually space shuttle boosters, just extended by one segment. And on top of that, there is a second stage and then capsule with ESM. So, and apparently, stacking began in November 2024 and was completed on October 2025 with full installation of Orion, ESM, and launch abort system atop the SLS rocket. There is actually a part of the reason why this happened is also because part of the Artemis 2 was also, I believe, reuse of Artemis 1, certain parts of Artemis 1, but because of how things happened, there was some issues with again heat shield and stuff like that. So it was basically timeline slipped, and that's just fine, especially on a spacecraft that she's supposed to host humans for 10 days. Things need to work perfectly. So they found few areas on the ablative heat shield, which then they had to figure out what happened. But apparently they apparently did just that, and they managed to fix everything. So there were a few other mission delays, but by the looks of it, things happened quite well. So, but the real start of the mission, we could say, begins on March 12th. So, really, a month before I recorded this, with flight readiness review, what were seven with that 7 2-hour launch windows were announced for April 30th and I don't know. I don't know what this is saying, but okay. So okay. Correction. So which makes sense. Like for between 1st and 6th of April, and for 30th and April 30th, which makes sense because of how rotation of the moon, rotation of the rocket, and also the Earth. It wouldn't be in the right position for this test. On March 18th, NASA announced that Artemis 2 SLS rocket will be rolled out next day for on pad 39B, which is where they launch SLS. So pad 39B is the one of the places where it's one of the most known launch sites of yeah, no, I lost it. So okay, let's step back. So what is Launchpad 39B? It's the sister pad to possibly more known 39A, where I believe most of Apollo launches were handled. Now it's used by SpaceX for most of its crewed launches to space station. So it is used to ferry humans to space again. But now it's mainly used by SpaceX, so they cannot use it for any other system. But 39B was made to be used for SLS, and 39B is the one like we could say prime launch locations in Kennedy Space Center. So before they could launch, the NASA crew entered quarantine in Houston, Texas, just essentially to ensure that during the flight they will be healthy and ready to go. But because there were some delays, the rollout had to be delayed slightly bit. Like always, there's always some delays, and with that, we are almost there. And okay, so here we go. Mission started, I believe, on April 1st. Yeah. So they arrived on 27th, yada yada yada. We all know what happened. They launched to space. Okay, I'm gonna cut this part out. So after they arrived to Kennedy Space Center, a couple of days before the launch, with launch countdown beginning on March 30th, with essentially the ceremonies, stuff like that. And they were set up aboard the Orion capsule and SLS rocket on April 1st at Kennedy Space Center and then they launched at about 1.5 hours till midnight UTC, which was about 6:30 EDT, local time at the launch site in the afternoon. And it was first crewed launch, almost a crewed launch flight from LC 39B, so the launch pad 39B, since the SDS 116 in 2006. So if you're interested in why SDS is, that's Space Shuttle. So Space Transportation System, or Space Shuttle, for more of the like layman's terms. And so they were carried upon the exhaust of the Hydrolox powered RS-25 main engines and solid rocket boosters, which carried them all the way to Earth's orbit. Unlike with STS or Space Shuttle, the solid rocket boosters are actually expendable. So during the times of shuttle, those solid rocket boosters, think of them as those white sticks at the side of the shuttle main tank. They they are also the side things on the course by the core stage of SLS. So the white sticks. If you ever saw SLS, you know what I'm talking about. Unlike the shuttle ones, which were reused or reusable, I believe these ones aren't because they get a lot higher in the air, and because of that, they get also very fast in the air, and as I said, a lot higher. So when they splash down into the ocean, they get damaged, I believe, and therefore are not recoverable. But yeah, so these are 5 segment ones, while the space shuttle used 4 segment boosters, and just like with the solid rocket boosters, also the RS-25 main engines will not be recovered, even though the original use for them, again on space shuttle, they were recovered together with the whole space shuttle. So they got into the orbit, into high Earth orbit, which believe it's about 71,000 kilometers in their case. So they had an almost 1 full day orbit, and it was literally, I believe, the first time a crewed spacecraft had entered a high Earth orbit, because normally they would go almost directly to the moon. After this burn, so when they did perform multiple burns with the second stage, with the ICPS. So that would be in well, I now forget what ICPS stands for. Interim cryogenic propulsion stage. I believe that could be right. Yeah. So the ICPS did a few burns, including raising perigee out of the atmosphere. So perigee being the lowest point in the orbit, while apogee is the highest point in the orbit. And yeah, with apogee being at 71,000 kilometers for them. So with that, most of the fuel in ICPS was burned, and they separated from the upper stage, so the ICPS. With that, they started with so-called proximity operations, which were demonstrations using ICPS as target for things like handling capabilities, practice techniques for future docking operations, like docking to Blue Moon and what's its name, Starship HLS. Now that Lunar Gateway is cancelled, which I think is kind of sad. And along with that, ICPS performed another burn. Now that it's alone, performed a Okay, so one of the things ICPS was equipped with was a docking target. So basically, how to say this, a mock of an like how the docking adapter would look, the internal parts of the docking adapter, the kind of widget they actually like would look at to dock to. So okay, no, actually, So ICPS was also equipped with a docking target, which is the part of the docking adapter that spacecraft and the human pilots of the spacecraft see and use as a reference point to dock to a ship. But unlike most cases, this I believe didn't have an actual docking adapter itself, so they only use it to be able to test the Orion's ability to manually maneuver relative to another spacecraft using its onboard navigation sensors and reaction control thrusters. After this demonstration, Orion was returned to automated control while ICPS performed the orbit burn, so it could harmlessly, relatively speaking, re-enter into Earth, Earth's atmosphere and be destroyed over Pacific. So they didn't either stay in space and just be there, or fall dangerously onto Earth. With the important part being that it also deployed few CubeSats. So these are small satellites, I believe size like this. I think there is a unit of measure for CubeSats, like how many cubes of something, I don't know. So actually we can see. So a CubeSat is form factor of 10 centimeter cubes and no more than 2 kilograms per unit. So they are great for groups like science schools, like colleges, so they can actually design this. They're fairly cheap to both launch, with many missions having ride shares. So these are like ride alongs. Like while we're launching this big satellite, you can also launch your CubeSat with us for a really cheap price and stuff like that. So at which point but these CubeSats weren't actually made to last, or most of them weren't made to last, because they were already in launched after the deorbit burn. So I believe most of them uh, re-entered into Earth atmosphere at some point. Uh, After all of this testing were done, they set up their exercise devices, which is one of the most important things, and they set up other things for them to actually be able to work and do things. So why is exercise machine important? So during a space flight, you're in 0 G, so you're losing your muscle density, bone density at a unusually rapid rate for a human, because both your muscles and your bones aren't being used that much. So during space flight, what they do is they have, but it be flywheel exercise machines, resistive machines. On a space station, they even I believe they even have a, like, you get strapped by your waist onto a what's it called, onto a running track, and you run for hour or two, which is really good. And then they had some dinners, and then they went to sleep. At which point they were interrupted at the midpoint of the sleep for a 43-second burn by European service module. Once again, Europeans made it. That raised the spacecraft perigee again to prepare for translunar injection burn, the so-called TLI. After which they went to sleep again. At which point, managers reviewed the spacecraft performance before they allowed the TLI burn. Okay. On flight day 2, they actually started and did a 5-minute 49-second TLI burn using ESM's AJ10 main engine. So I believe AJ-10 is also from Space Shuttle. It was the main maneuvering thruster, I believe. I could be wrong. Well, yeah, I believe, yeah. It was part of the orbital maneuvering, and it was called orbital maneuvering engine, part of the OMS pod. So, but it is now also used. Actually, the refurbished ones from Shuttle are being used on ESM, which is great. Like reusing old components is just amazing, in my opinion. That is, since they had all that, that's amazing. They can do this. So at that point, after that burn was concluded, they were on their way to moon. That's a translunar injection burn. So translunar means that it is that you can go, that you're on the path to moon, and injection means that you basically went to that path, and it is specifically the specific path they chose was specific because it was like free return trajectory, so they didn't have to do any major burns to get to get behind the moon. And when they got out, it was a straight shot directly into uh, um, directly back to Earth. So there was no entering into an orbit or having to do a major burn. So they didn't just straight shot into space far away from Earth, which is amazing. So there were more planned out. So so there were more outbound trajectory correction burns that were planned but never executed uh, due to the spacecraft being on a good trajectory or favorable trajectory, as it's called. There were some issues with space toilet, at which point I believe Christina named herself Space Janitor or something like, or Space Plumber, I believe. And let's not go into why it happened. But yeah, well, or what happened. On day 4, they took additional tests of its performance outside of Earth orbit. They tested two thruster control modes. So first one was 6 degrees of freedom. 6 degrees is up, down, left, right, roll, and pitch, and forward and backward. Let's see. Yeah, 6 degrees of freedom of 6 degrees of movement is either up, down, back, forward, left, right, pitch, roll, and yaw. So up, down is 1, back, forward is 2, right, left is 3, pitch, roll, and yaw. Each of them is a separate direction or a movement you can do with either a plane or a spacecraft. So that would be their sort of surge, heave, sway, and so on. So surge would be forward and backward, heave would be up and down, and sway is left and right. So, and then they also tested the 3 degrees of freedom, so that would be only pitch, yaw, and roll, which are also typically the tracked degrees of freedom in virtual reality, interestingly enough. After that, after concluding those tests, they provided those on the ground engineers a lot of further data on spacecraft handling qualities, because well, a lot of that cannot be really done remotely when you're trying to actually do human space flight on the craft itself. On day 5, Orion performed a 17.5-second outbound trajectory correction burn to refine its path to the moon, and it was the only one executed, I believe, of the all the outbound tests. They also tested the crew survival system suits and did some conferences with mission control to review observation targets and stuff like that. As they were doing some photography tests, including I believe they had iPhones with them for like using consumer devices to take pictures, and they were, but they believe they were called them personal computing devices or personal photography devices. I believe they didn't want to call them iPhones, apparently. So on flight day 6, they entered what is known as Moon's sphere of influence. What it means is that lunar gravity becomes a dominant force on the spacecraft. Of course, Earth's gravity is still important and still does have some effect on the of the spacecraft, but the moon's gravity well is the one that is mainly doing the pulling. For those of you who know KSP, they know what the sphere of influence is. It's at a time when you are switched to another view of another planet or celestial body for us KSP fans. But it isn't as simple in real life as it is in KSP. They flew around the moon and did the closest approach of about 6,500 kilometers from the far side lunar surface on April 6th at 1 hour till midnight UTC. It's also furthest distance from Earth at about 407,000 kilometers at 3202 UTC, and it surpassed the record set by Apollo, which was a couple of thousand kilometers lower, which was at the time record for farthest crewed mission from Earth. As the as the spacecraft went behind the moon, it experienced a planned loss of signal for about 40 minutes, beginning at 22:46 UTC and recovery signal at 23:24 UTC. After they got done with the radio communication blackout, they had an experience of 1 hour solar eclipse when sun was fully obscured by the moon for them, and they did observe things like solar. So after that, they observed things like solar corona as well as impact flashes from meteoroids impacting dark portions of the moon. They also saw stars and planets, including Venus, Mars, Mercury, and Saturn, which were visible alongside the corona, as was Earthshine illuminating the moon. Yes, there's also some light that goes from Earth to moon. This is not artificial light. It is actually sun's light reflecting off Earth onto the moon. It's actually really interesting. At which point they started their return flight on day 7. Really started as soon as they went around the moon. They started their return flight, with day 7 being the exit of Moon's sphere of influence, and they started their return. After leaving the sphere of influence, they also talked with ISS crew of ESA and NASA astronauts, during which conversation they pointed out that they all became the humans that were farthest apart from each other because, well, ISS, I believe, the 17 orbits per day, so one of those orbits had to be behind Earth when they were behind the so they were when they were behind the moon, so they were furthest apart logically. So at that point, They did some rest periods, so they have to do staggered off-duty rest periods and stuff like that, and they did a correction burn for trajectory of 50 seconds. The first of three that refined the path towards Earth. On day 8, they were supposed to have additional manual control test, but was cancelled so controllers could do additional testing of the Orion's propulsion system. The change allowed engineers to gather data on a small leak on ESM and better characterize its behavior in flight. Although the leak did not affect mission safety, the data is expected to inform propulsion system modifications for future Artemis missions. They were also supposed to perform a demonstration of spacecraft radiation shielding, but that was cancelled. So they have a they have enough resources that are somewhat radiation hardening. They can create a makeshift radiation bunker if, for example, they uh, during the time an unexpected solar flare happened and they were hit by larger than normal radiation amount. With that, day 9 started with 9-second trajectory burn to refine its return trajectory again, and mostly they were preparing for splashdown, with day 10 being the last day, at which point they actually jettisoned the ESM before re-entry. So that means they cut the lines between ESM and Orion and essentially undocked themselves. Essentially threw away the ESM, which also burned up in the re-entry. So while that is the case, that ESM provides a lot of the all of the consumables, including fuel. Orion on its own also has enough fuel, including thrusters, so it can do limited amount of maneuvering in space without the ESM. Specifically, the maneuvering it does, it pushes itself away from ESM, so the reentry is safer, and just angling the spacecraft so it hits the atmosphere at a proper angle for it to not burn up on reentry. Okay, at which point reentry started at maximum velocity of, whoa, 40,000 kilometers per hour, which is equal to 11 kilometers per second. So they've gone like 30 kilometers at that point. And at which point they started to slow down. But that velocity is, while much faster than what you see on missions to Earth orbit, is actually comparable to what we saw on Apollo program. They plan to do what is known as a skip reentry, so basically in out, but due to discoveries they had in the from Artemis 1 regarding the heat shield, they decided that a more steeper angle would be better. So they had a steeper entry profile, which allowed for smaller heating period, but at much faster speed. But it gets slower much faster. So at which point they splashed down on April 11th, 7 minutes past midnight UTC, in the Pacific Ocean near San Diego, California, where the U.S. Navy recovered the crew. It's actually the first crewed NASA mission to be recovered by Navy since Apollo-Soyuz test project. Remember that a lot of crewed space flights after that were either now SpaceX missions, where SpaceX has its own recovery in in conjunction with NASA, or shuttle missions which were actually landing on land. And they had a few aircraft flying around the the landing site, providing views of landing and recovery, which were very interesting to see. I watched them. It was interesting to see. And we also saw a few helicopters imaging and recovering the astronauts. After the crew egress, the Orion capsule was recovered by the Navy, and astronauts underwent medical evaluation, which includes post-landing functional testing, including obstacle course and a simulated spacewalk to to assess how quickly they can adapt to gravity following a mission in preparation for further lunar and Mars operations. They also have few experiments on board, including a payload titled Avatar, a virtual astronaut tissue analog response, which mimics individual astronaut organs, but this was the first time it was tested outside of ISS or Earth's Van Allen belts. Crew health for this mission was critical, as it is critical for missions in deep space in the future. The mission also included a new payload called Archer. Artemis is just for crew health and readiness. Crew wore movement and sleep monitors before, during, and after the mission to study real-time health and behavioral information for crew members. So scientists could study sleep patterns and overall health performance. So they also do some other tests, like including immunity biomarkers, with crew providing different samples of, I believe, saliva before, during, and after the mission to test their immune system and how they were affected by radiation, isolation, and distance away from Earth during deep space flight. This mission also intended to allow astronauts and scientists to understand space weather, that will be much bigger issue for us in future missions, as well humans will need to survive and sustain themselves for a longer periods in space, especially if we're going to have moon base and then flight to Mars, which could take months upon months. They also had, and this is one that I think is the very important one, the test and demonstration of optical communications to and from Earth using Orion Artemis 2 optical communication system O2O, which uses laser beams to communicate between Earth and Orion and Earth. This provides us near light speed communication between the Orion and Earth at much higher bandwidth that would be allowed by conventional radio waves, and it is also smaller, lighter, and uses far less power for the transmission rate it has. The O2O hardware is integrated into Orion, and it includes a optical module, 4-inch telescope, so that's 100 millimeter telescope, and 2 gimbals. A modern a modem, not a modern, a modem and control electronics. O2O communicates with ground stations in California and New Mexico. The test data sent to Earth with an uplink rate of up to 260 megabits per second. Impressive, actually. That's actually really impressive for Earth to spacecraft communication, because, like, now that means we can communicate with probes that can be also even hundreds, millions of kilometers away, and you can get footage that is like crisp and like at 1080p or even higher resolutions without much problems, which used to be a problem when Deep Space Network only operated on radio waves of different bands. I think X band might be the one. I don't know. I never really dove deep enough into the radio waves. I just like the SN. So as we already mentioned, they also had CubeSats aboard the ICPS. There were a few CubeSats. Let's not talk about them because, well, we're already long into the mission and talk. So these missions were most analogous to Apollo 7 and Apollo 8 tests of spacecraft in both Earth and lunar orbit, but unlike Apollo 8, Artemis never entered lunar orbit due to performance limitations with the ESM, which cannot independently depart from low lunar orbit. Yeah, ESM isn't the most powerful of the of the service modules, and part of it is also because it was saddled with much less power for ICPS compared to the actual crew exploration stage, which should be available by the time I think by the time first crewed landing should occur, I believe, if I remember correctly. There were some, of course, wake up calls which played some music. So I think at this point we have talked about rockets enough for probably quite a while, but don't you think so? Okay, so thank you guys for watching. So don't forget to like this episode in any way, shape, or form, whether it be on your favorite podcatcher, whether it be on YouTube. Please do like it because it will mean so much to me as it is really, really, really hard to make such an episode without my friend Josh here. It is really hard to just talk about something without having uh, like a voice to talk with. That's why solo podcasts never really work out that well. You need a guest or at least somebody you can talk with. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. Me and Josh both have YouTube channels. Find us on Bigpod. He's Dan Lee J. He does his amazing streams of distro hacking. I do videos sometimes when I remember to upload them or edit them. Yeah, that's a problem for me. Uh, what else is there to say? Oh yeah, check out our Patreon, where you can get access to exclusive high bitrate bitrate stream of our podcast, where maximum bitrate 320 megabit per second, kilobit per second. I don't know. I just edit things and export them at the right settings. I could be wrong. Don't ask me. It's what should I say? It's let's see, audio. Yeah, 320 something. Don't ask me what. I wouldn't know. What else is there? Oh yeah, you can check both of me and Josh out on various social media. The one we promote the most is Mastodon. Yet, honestly, I'm not active on any social media by and large, which probably doesn't do me any good service on my path to become a good YouTuber. But oh well. So what else is there to say? I'm probably forgetting something. Oh yeah, email. If you have any comments and you're listening to the podcast and you don't know where you can type your comments, send me and Josh the comments on an email, contact@tuxbase.com. Did I say that right? Yes, I did. Or if you're on YouTube, comment section down below. But if you are into more of an instant messaging communication, like the chats we use these days, you can check out our Discord. Or if you're more on the self-hosted liking side or more open side of that, we also have our own Matrix channel, Matrix server. You can check out. Probably both are in the description down below or in the show notes, wherever the hell they are. So you can just check them out and join us and talk with us. We'll probably respond at one point. And I think that's it. Why do I think I'm forgetting something? Oh well, goodbye.